Okay, so this one's probably the hardest of the bunch. And just to reiterate, this is not a beginner conversation. This is more for probably intermediate advanced technique. Not because the techniques themselves seem that advanced, but because the implementation or application on a live body is tremendously difficult. And you'll find some of the transitions I'm talking about in some locking arts, but from my experience, I had to look beyond the systems that I originally trained and do a deep dive, looking at more Chinese style, Southeast Asian style martial arts to find transitions that I found effective against good striking. Okay, so of the transitions I've talked about, this one is by far the hardest. And it may or may not be relevant for most people. I trained it quite a bit, studied it quite a bit, and I think that at the very minimum, it's a great academic study in movement and sensitivity, a little bit of biomechanics. Whether or not you could apply it, I'm not sure I could apply it if I had to. It's a very sophisticated technique, but it's super nuanced. And so I just put it out there for you guys to consider it. But that being said, again, this is not a beginner tutorial or conversation. This is for the intermediate advanced martial artist. So we talked in the trapping vid about this idea where the strike is coming in, the limb is coming in. This is your right hand. You're striking me with a right cross or a reverse punch, however you want to look at that. And it's understanding that when we looked at the trapping technique that somebody is extending that limb towards you. So what does the trapping technique do? Well, it helps. I'm just supporting it down toward me, but with a bit of extra love, right? It's a hard slam that draws the whole structure down. It pulls me out of my center. It pulls my shoulder a little bit forward. And within that split second, it buys time where they are unstructured and where you've got control. That was the premise. But within that, this extension movement is what we're looking for, right? So now with following, the assumption is this. I know that if a person extends the hand and they have any modicum of training, they're not going to leave it out there for me to do what I want with it, right? This is going to happen. That retraction is going to happen. So following or sticking is the idea that you let that technique come to fruition, you get out of the line of fire, but then you follow it back in and enter with the technique. Now this might be an application or an approach to apply a high shoulder lock would probably be the prime example, but you could also use it for whipping throws from the outside. So the way this technique works, as the right cross starts to come my direction, I'm going to parry it. Now assuming you can parry, if you've done any boxing, if you've done any basic fighting, if you can parry a technique, it gives you at least enough time to do things like traps, destructions. But in this case, it's a little bit more nuanced. So the technique comes out, I parry. Now, I'm drawing this across my center line, which buys me space. Normally, I said in one of the other videos about self-defense, you don't want to cross your own center line. The few exceptions might be is if you are to the outside of your opponent's guard. This is one of those rare times, and you got to be damn good to pull it off. Anticipatory, right? You need to see this technique coming. So as it's extended, parry, and intercept here with the outside. Now that technique is still going to be extending. Now as he starts to draw that back in, I'm going to feel that pull. I'm going to feel that slight friction and follow it into the armpit. This hand would take over the wrist. Okay, so that type of motion is here and here. And so look, why might this work? Because as we discussed, good trapping does not address one tool or one limb only, because we have to know that at least one other technique is probably chambered, and if the structure is still in place, if they've got their center, well, they can throw more techniques, adapt, and adjust. So all good transitioning techniques need to address at least the next possible technique, if not the entire structure of the individual. This is not a technique that shifts that structure of the person until a lock is set in, a high shoulder lock or a whipping throw. So what needs to happen is I need to understand that technique is coming, and I need to move toward the outside of that person's body, away from their other hand. Okay, so out here, across the center line, and now I'm moving away from that tool in limbo. Right, and I've used this technique in a few of my demos with the sash. It works very much the same way in terms of application, but this is the point where if you understand the principle involved, that you are essentially trying to enter, stick to that technique, and assist back to their chamber. So it's not looking now at the extension, which we do with the trap, it's looking at the retraction. So coming here, and it's feeling and guiding that up into another technique. Now, like I said, this would not be one of my go-to techniques unless I was absolutely sure I could dominate this person, because I would consider this more of a high-risk alternative. It's possible you could get to here in the technique and integrate low shin kicks, elbows, a couple of transitions or destructions along the way that would buy you time for the lock. That's always possible, and it's not a bad strategy in general. But this is just to look at the principle of intercepting and its purity, because why not? It's interesting stuff. This particular one I think you could find in White Crane Kung Fu as a general premise of transition. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick one here. If it's interesting, got any comments, questions, please let me know in the comments. Again, this is not a beginner conversation, so if you're looking at it and you're like, wow, it would never work in a fight, or call in BS, you are right. This will not work in a fight for you. You're not willing to put the time in. But for the intermediate advanced guys, the lifers, those guys that are looking at the more technical aspects of intercepting techniques and applying locks, this is for you. Any questions, comments, you know where to leave them. And until the next time, guys, be weightless.